Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Georgia is a developing country and we are in this endless process of transition. And Georgia has acquired most of the tools to be a functioning market economy. We have free trade with most of our neighbors. We have very low taxes in Georgia. We are actually in the 9th place in the world. And we had very effective privatization policy. So we have sold most of our public assets. But we are still a poor country. Do you think that something is missing from this toolkit of economic development in Georgia?
Well, Georgia for a long time faced big geopolitical challenges and this very complicated region of the world, every Georgian knows. But I think under the current conditions, we see quite rapid progress right now. In the last few years, a lot more tourists coming to this country, new businesses, economic growth. So there is definitely something good happening right now. And all of those benefits of pretty normal relations with the neighborhood is a big advantage. Of course, I think that any successful economy needs to operate on two legs. One is the private sector, but the other is a strong public sector as well. Quality education, access to health care, provision of core infrastructure. So I think that there's a lot that the government is going to need to do over the next 10 years in improving education at all levels, increasing science and technology, research and development in the economy. Clearly, there's a lot of infrastructure need in this country and linking Georgia to neighbors in infrastructure. But I emphasize that the infrastructure should be sustainable infrastructure, meaning environmentally of the future, not of the past. Clean energy based on wind and solar and hydroelectric and geothermal power, electric vehicles in the future, new transport technologies. This will be the infrastructure that needs to be built, but it will need an active government that is able to pay its way. Low taxes won't solve that problem because governments need enough revenues to be able to provide enough public services and enough public investment.
The question about the inequality. Today, it's a kind of a global problem now. 26% owns as much wealth as the poorest half of the population. It's around 3.6
26 billion
yeah,
richest people.
Yeah, 26. So, President Donald Trump somehow supports this race to the bottom policy because he's cutting taxes for the rich. Do you think this policy is good for the economy, for the economic growth, and somehow the developing country should emulate these policies, what United States are doing now?
Well, if you put tax policy in the hands of a cheat, unfortunately, I have to use that word, you don't get good results. And the Trump family has cheated on its taxes for decades. So this is really a serious problem, and there are many investigations in the United States underway right now in the state of New York and at the federal level about the taxes that Trump has paid. So I don't trust him to choose the right tax policy. Of course, rich people often want tax cuts for themselves because they don't seem to even know or care about the needs of poor people. But politics is not just for rich people. Politics should be for everybody. So I've not been happy with the U.S. Budget policy under Trump. He cuts the taxes for the rich, and then he turns around and says, oh, we have to cut social spending for the poor because we don't have enough revenue. Well, that's a kind of dishonesty, and it's a cheat. And maybe a billionaire like Trump can get away with it, but it's not good for the American people.
In your speech at Tbilisi State University, you mentioned that for implementing SDG goals, there should be some kind of social democratic policies. So could you please clarify what do you mean under this?
Social democracy is a style of government, and it's most characteristic of the countries of Northern Europe: Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Iceland, Germany, and the Netherlands. Those countries all raise a lot of taxation, and then using those taxes, they say you have free access to health care, free access to education, including college tuition. You have guaranteed support for your children in daycare, early childhood development spending. You have vacation time. You have family leave time when a new child comes. In other words, lots of public benefits paid for by a lot of tax revenues. But the idea of social democracy is no one should be too rich or too poor, but it's a market system, private ownership, open trade. It's not at all the Soviet Gosplan central planning, but it also isn't the neoliberal system. Neoliberal meaning the government shouldn't do anything, keep taxes very low, let the businesses do what they want. That's not social democracy. And in my view, the neoliberal system ends up with massive inequality and without public investment or services, whereas social democracy ends up with low inequality, everybody has quality services, and the economy is quite prosperous because you don't have half the country uneducated or so many people sick because of ill health.
What would you call sustainable economic development in the 21st century? And my second question is, does this new Green Deal somehow falls in this category, which was proposed by some democratic representatives, and if it is feasible policy?
Sustainable development means three things. It means economic development, it means social inclusion or social justice, that everybody gets to benefit, and it means environmental sustainability. It doesn't mean choose one out of the three. That's what the United States does. The US right now says, okay, we want a high-income country, but who cares about the distribution of income? Who cares about the dirty environment? Sustainable development says, no, all three should be kept in mind. You're not allowed to have economic growth that ruins the environment, and we don't want economic growth that just enriches a few people but leaves everybody else behind. And that is a feasible objective that leads to a much, much better society.
What about Green New Deal?
The Green New Deal is a wonderful initiative of especially our young new Congress people. We have Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a New York City Congresswoman. I'm very impressed with her, and she's proposed this Green New Deal, which goes back to the ideas of Franklin Roosevelt when he was President of the United States, put a lot of people to work, but also this time we need to go to renewable energy, not to dirty energy. We need to go to clean air, not to the polluting industries. So I'm a supporter of the concept of the Green New Deal, but I have to say, at this stage, still in the United States, it doesn't have detailed plans. So the next step is to take a good idea and to turn them into workable plans.
Think retrospectively about the shock doctrine which was kind of implemented in Georgia and in other post-Soviet republics. To think on this question retrospectively, do you think that this shock therapy had some inherent flaws?
Well, I was involved in so-called shock therapy in Poland, and I know what it means there. But the meaning of the term also was very different in different places. When I was asked in Poland to be the advisor and actually to write a plan for Poland that then became part of the Balcerowicz plan in Poland, now we're talking almost 30 years ago, the idea wasn't neoliberal versus something else. The idea was very clear, which was to become a normal economy as fast as possible. And in the case of Poland, it was to join the European Union. Actually, it was not even the European Union at the moment, but the European Community, as fast as possible. And so I designed a set of policy recommendations that would make Poland look as much like Germany or other countries of Western Europe as fast as possible. That was called shock therapy at the time. Later on, the term was used to mean neoliberalism, which means not only moving fast, but moving in a particular way, cut taxes, cut services, cut government, free market economy. That's not how I would use the term. When I was advising Poland, I often said one expression. I said, if you want to be a normal economy, there are a few things to do: stopping the price controls, making the currency convertible, and so on, that you would do whether you wanted to be like a free market Great Britain at the time under Thatcher, or you wanted to be a social democracy like Sweden. No matter which direction, still some basics are the same. And I personally wanted countries to go in the direction of Sweden rather than in the direction of neoliberalism. But of course, that's not my choice as an advisor. That's each country's choice to make in its political processes. But what I did help Poland to do was get to a situation quickly where it could start to have economic growth and where it could make the choice. My view is that process worked quite well when there was a national unity, honesty of government, and some consensus about the kind of society that the people of the country wanted. Poland had a quarter century of good economic growth. When the same kinds of policies were tried in Russia, it didn't work, in part because there was so much division in Russia that nobody could agree with anybody else, and partly because there was so much corruption in Russia that nobody was interested, it seems, in playing by rules. Everybody wanted to grab this enterprise, grab that enterprise.
Especially in terms of privatization.
Well, the privatization was particularly horrible in Russia. I wasn't a designer of it, I was just a witness to it, but it was pretty ugly because it created a lot of wealth very quickly in an unfair way.
Thank you so much, Professor Sachs.
Pleasure.